you're writing a book about Giannis that
Yes.
you've pretty much completed. How many interviews did you end up doing?
220.
Wow. Did it, at some point were you like, should I go for 250? Are there 30 people who have tangentially met him that I could just drag into this, or 220 is a
No,
good number?
I know. I felt really competitive about it. I was like, can I hit 300? And then it was like, actually, you know what? You can't just find the Bucks person that's a fan and talk to them for 2 minutes. It doesn't count. So I kept it at 220.
So I want to talk about Giannis in the context of he should probably win the MVP again if he's on the pace he's on now. And we're just looking at this without any sort of bias, any sort of what happened the last 2 years. He's the best two-way player in the league. He's having 97% of the same offensive season he had the last 2 years. He's on a team that's a contender. Unlike everybody else, he hasn't been shelved by some major injury except for somebody like Jokic or Dame. And yet, no, but everybody's tired of Giannis. We've now done the full arc of, isn't this adorable? Whoa, the guy from Greece. Oh, he actually might be good. Whoa, Giannis is a star. Oh, the freak. Oh, he's an MVP candidate. And now we're at not the backlash stage, but all right, we get the whole Giannis thing stage. Do you think he feels this?
I mean, I think that I've been seeing that so much, right? Like everyone was like afraid to say out loud, he might be better than last year, or like he might be blah, blah. It's almost like, why is this a bad thing to say? Like, why can't we appreciate this? I think he personally does not care what people think. And I know it's become cliche these days, right? Athletes say that all the time, like, oh, I don't care, I don't listen. But genuinely, he does not read what people say or listen. So I don't think it matters to him. But I mean, it's incredible. And I think people are finally like kind of irritated about it.
Yeah. Well, I think at some point the LeBron media mafia obviously gets involved and they do the whole he's only won 4 MVPs. So if it ever got to the precipice of Giannis being a 3-time in a row MVP, which is like Larry Bird did that in the mid 80s. I think Bill Russell or Will Chamberlain, one of those guys did it. But it's just about the rarest thing you can do as a player. And I think there would be a backlash to that. More of the case of no, it can't be him. He's never made the finals, and it'll turn into that whole thing. But it would obscure that I agree with you. I think he's, especially in the last month, there's been an extra level to him, especially at the end of games. There's a kind of competitive anger to him, maybe from the losing from the last couple of years, right? Do you see that?
Yeah, because that wasn't him. He wasn't that like Mamba mentality, like, I'm going to kill you and destroy you. Like, he's very much like, let the game come to you. You know, I'm going to obviously recognize that I am the first option, obviously, but there wasn't that like extra level of dominance that I'm seeing right now. I don't know. He's just completely like, no, I can do this. This is my time. And I think that's just a different thing that we haven't seen before with him.
Yeah, the first month of the season, it almost seemed like he had stagnated, where it was like, all right, maybe this is just who he is. They're trying to turn him into a perimeter guy. He's never really developed the low post stuff, and he's just never kind of figured out that blend to go up that extra level. But then I thought the Philly game was really interesting the other day,
Mhm.
especially he kind of took over down the stretch, but then when he sat on the floor, there was a performance aspect to it that I kind of liked, where there was a little edge to it, and I think sometimes this stuff it's almost has to come from pain,
Oh,
where
yeah.
you need a couple tough losses. You need to get kicked in the crotch a couple times, and then something kind of hardens in you, and then it starts coming out. And it does feel like it's a little reminiscent of LeBron in the 2012, his second Heat season, when he was just a punching bag for 9 months, and then he came back with like a different level of something. Not that Giannis has had the kind of shit LeBron went through there for a couple years, but there's something, right?
No, it's true. And it's also just because he is aware, like everybody in Milwaukee is aware that like the time is now. Like, you don't want to squander this guy's prime. Like, they have to move. And like there's been that pressure, I think, even before this time, but particularly right now. Like, you don't want to squander this guy's best years, especially with, concerns of injury and things like that. So I just think there is so much pain. And there's also just it's like always looking at the clock, with Giannis. And it's been like that his whole career, right? Like, you know, he came when they almost like didn't have a franchise, right? And then he builds them up to be this contender. He saves the freaking franchise from leaving Milwaukee, but it's just not good enough anymore. It's not good enough just to be there. It's not good enough just to contend or to get 60 wins. And I think he's like playing with almost like that level of anger that it's like we literally have to move past these boundaries.
Yeah. Do you think so? You said earlier, like he's just different, right? Which I think we've all seen from the get go. And a lot of that has to do with background, how you grew up, but also like the compare and contrast to like every experience that he had that formed him versus how the typical American basketball superstar is formed, right? Where they become famous 10, 11, 12 in like these little AAU circles. They get to all know each other. They have people coming at them, by age 15, 16. They're on social media and they're becoming a thing by the time they're a sophomore in high school. I mean, there's IMDb TV is running this documentary about LeBron's son's high school team, Sierra Canyon, that's out here where we live. And it's just like, it's the complete opposite of whatever experience Giannis had trying to grow up. So I do feel like, to me, it's almost like there's the American superstar and then there's the overseas guy, the Jokic, Luka, Giannis, people like that they just seem to think differently. But yet when we look at their motives, we always assume they have the motives of the American player where it's like, oh, he's going to want to leave. He's going to want to win a title. It's time for him to go. And like, do you think he's just wired differently like that? He's never going to want to leave? What do you think?
Yeah, I do think he is wired differently because of his upbringing. I do think that, leaving was just, it just wouldn't make sense to him. That's not how he thinks. That's not how he grew up. What I find interesting is the masculine culture that a lot of these kids, these Sierra Canyon kids grow up with. They're used to being very showy. They put their highlights on, their Twitter, their Instagrams. Giannis literally, I found one of the most interesting parts of reporting the book is he used to be so emotional because in Greece, like boys weren't socialized the way they are in America. So he would cry after the game. Like if he felt like he wasn't performing up to standard, like it so wounded him that he was not playing amazing every time, or he was too rebound shy that he would visibly cry. And his teammates acted like, it's not a big deal. His coach was like, yep, that's just Giannis. He cries. And he comes to America. And his strength coach at the Bucks his rookie year is like, Giannis, you can't do that. We don't do that in the NBA. We don't cry. And so I just think like even something like that just shows you like they approach things differently internationally. They're not supposed to think that they're the best. They're supposed to think I have to work my hardest just to get a tiny, tiny, slice of the pie or a fraction of a chance. And if I somehow don't measure up, it's my fault. That's completely different.
Well, and then the other piece that he has that's so great, and it's a little different than Embiid. Embiid is, I think, even though he's international, he seems like an American player. Like even from the moment he came in the league, he's a little more showy. He embraces it. He loves it. But he's also somebody that from the moment he started playing basketball, he's one of the favorites, right? He's the tall guy. He's the overpowering dude. I think what's so interesting about Giannis is the late bloomer piece with, and then Luka, who's at this league when he's 18, he's another one who has to he has to prove he can belong. He's being thrown into the fire in a crazy way. And he actually was able to turn around. Giannis, and we talked about it because you interviewed me for your book. I made you interview me. No, you asked me. I don't know how we arrived at it. But when I did that draft that year and he was this 6'9" kid and nobody had any idea.
Right.
He went 15, 16. We had no idea if it was a good pick. It seemed like decent value. But you also could have told me he was going to be out of the league in 2 years. I would have believed it.
But that's why I also think how miraculous is this extensive network of scouting? All these people flew to Athens to see him, not to discover something. He was identified as talent. The question was, how good is he? Right? You looked at his film, it was super grainy. It was awful. It looked like some JV game with people with, stubble and pot bellies. And you had no idea, right? You didn't even know how tall his teammates were in relation. But that just goes to show you these scouts, they do their homework and they know people have intangible things. And so even though the top two powerhouse teams in Greece, Panathinaikos and Olympiakos, there's these storied EuroLeague powerhouses, they didn't want him, but NBA scouts weren't coming to Athens to go visit those players. They were coming to visit Giannis because his game fit in America, because he had the athleticism, the length, all those things. And one of the things I enjoyed talking with you about my book is the revisionist history. And sure, if we knew he would, sprout, 2 more inches, he would not have fallen to 15. But yeah, it just goes to show you, it's like these people do their homework and they know.
Right. In the draft, he was 6'9". He was super athletic and he was fluid. And that was the
Right.
one thing you could see from the clips, even though you couldn't tell from the guys he was going against. But there's a fluidity to him that definitely felt NBA-ish, you
Right.
know? But
It didn't look weird.
if you told me he's gonna become 7 feet tall, we're doing that draft completely differently because now it's like, all right, his comp isn't Paul George. It's some human being that doesn't currently exist in the league, and he's probably a top 3 pick.
I mean, doesn't it show you though that there's so many factors? It's not just the height though, it's the work ethic. Like Giannis
Right.
stayed in this league because he works extremely hard. And I think work ethic just gets thrown around these days, but genuinely like he built his body into something and he had this natural God-given, height and athleticism. But, it's funny to watch those early tapes because like you said, he didn't look awkward. He just didn't have the body to do what his mind told him to do, right? Like he was not banging down there. Like I saw a clip from the game the other day and he just spins and he wraps around and he's just dunking and I'm like, "Oh my God, like why would anyone try to defend him when he gets that deep in the paint?" But if you look at, 2012 Giannis, it's like he was almost afraid of contact. He would, dip his shoulder and shy away.
Right. You see that sometimes. I'm a guy I really like in college right now who's not a crazy opinion, Evan Mobley at USC, who's going to be, I think,
Yeah,
the number 2 pick. And I
he's
think he
great.
should be being considered for the number 1 pick. And when you talk about the not quite knowing what your body is yet, you kind of shy away a little bit. There's times, especially with those tall, lanky 18, 19-year-olds, when they're around the rim, they kind of bring their body down or, they'll crouch a little bit and then pop back up. And then eventually they learn not to do that. And all of a sudden they're 7 feet all the time. That was the thing with Giannis. I remember, I don't remember what the first year, I think I saw him, it wasn't until his second year when I saw him in person, but he just jumped off the floor. Like in person, you're like, oh my God, wow, this is somebody who will never get hurt unless it's a freak injury. He just belongs out there and he just moves differently than everyone else on the floor. Like you could see it. I don't know if Mobley's like that. I'm excited to see him in person. But there was something shifted between that first and second year at the Bucks. Cause I remember at Grantland, we were kind of enamored with him. But then his second year, we kind of adopted him as like, oh, this is a thing that's happening. He had a nickname all of a sudden. And it was just kind of seemed like, all right, this is the guy Milwaukee had been begging for 40 years. When do you think the Milwaukee fans realized it?
I think it was that series. It might have been that second year when they played the Bulls and Dunleavy had the cheap shot on MCW and Giannis like beelined for him. And it was such a moment. It was like, okay, like Giannis
Yeah, I
has that
remember that.
heart, and it was like, obviously he hadn't learned how to, control, but the people, I talked to so many people that went to that game, even though they lost by like 60 points in that elimination game at the end, the fans stayed for like 10 minutes after, and you just heard this cheer, Milwaukee. And so even though like Giannis was still kind of a curiosity, right? Remember Jabari Parker was supposed to be the guy and Giannis was supposed to be the sidekick. At the time, it's like, that moment though, I think crystallized like, hey, Giannis is about it. He cares for us. He's going to defend his teammates. He's going to do whatever it takes. And I think that was like a very special, prideful moment that a lot of Milwaukeeans cherish.
Yeah, there was a hiccup, like a whisper of a moment where it was like, well, Jabari will be the Jordan and Giannis will be the Pippen. Like Jabari was really highly regarded. It just he
Oh
blew out both knees. But there's also an unbelievable what if from that draft where they could have just taken Embiid too. I think they
yeah, right.
wanted Jabari because he was a Midwestern kid and was going to be the rare kid who might want to actually stay in Milwaukee after his first contract and stuff like that. But Embiid was going to be the number 1 pick, got hurt. He fell to 3. Everyone was afraid to take him. But we really almost did have Embiid and Giannis on the same team. Like that was a thing that easily could have happened.
Like, can you imagine? Although this reminded me of something, we were just talking about the anger that Giannis seems to be playing with nowadays and this like very different tone we're seeing and taking over. I think around this time period that we're talking about, that 2014 to 15 to 16 stretch, that's when the anger started because Giannis thought he was going to be the player. And then Jabari comes in, and suddenly Giannis is just like the Robin, and he has to prove that he's the alpha. And they went at each other in practice. Like they learned to be friends. They liked each other eventually. But at first, Giannis was like, oh no, this is my team. Like I worked for this. And so I think, it's one of my favorite anecdotes from the book is Giannis practicing his angry face, his scowl, like in the mirror. He was just like, how do I look mean? Because, he just wasn't that guy. He was a nice guy. He was the guy that mopped up the floor in Sepolia, and he called his teammates by, like if one guy was named Christos, he would say Mr. Christos. So all of a sudden, Giannis has to learn how to get mean. And I think what you're seeing now is like 7 years of becoming mean.
What is his relationship with the other stars? From what you've seen in your reporting and stuff, has he been accepted inner circle yet, or is he still like the outsider? He's got to make the finals before they take him seriously. Because I know him and Durant have some stuff, like friendly, competitive stuff, but they definitely have some stuff.
Yeah, I mean, everyone knows what it is when it comes to Giannis. Like, there's no doubt anymore that he is that type of game changing, elite player. But Giannis prefers to not work out with these people because in his eyes, it's like, why would I give you my secret sauce? Like, why would I do that? Like I think in our era, modern NBA especially, there's been a tendency to be like banana boat, and Giannis is like never going to be on the banana boat ever. Like, unless it's his brothers on the boat with him, he's just not that guy. And like, he literally does not care about fashion and, going out in the tunnel. So these other superstars, it's just a different approach. It's almost old school in a way. Like, yeah, I'm not gonna, make jokes with you. I'm here to like bust your ass. Like, that is just a different thing that we haven't seen in a while.
I love it. I really think, I think he's so unique. I think most people would have played this season out and probably ended up in Dallas with Luka, because that was the smart move, right? It's like, all right, if me and Luka team up together, we're winning titles. I will get a claim. I'll be in the finals every year, and that's how it'll work out. And he didn't even consider it. Were you surprised that he signed the extension when he did? Like, what was your? I mean, I know the answer because you and I were talking about it. But for the audience, what was your instinct in those 2 weeks leading up to that?
I don't like when sports writers pretend that they knew what was going to happen when they did not. So truthfully, I thought it could go either way. Like, I really could see him staying because, of course, right, that goes along with everything we know about him as far as like loyalty and all those things, and hearing that his mom wanted to stay. So, and the emotional connection that he had to that city, right? They took a chance on him. He's, like we said, he's not one of those prospects that's like, oh, that team's lucky to have me. They took a chance on him, and he'll never forget that. On the other hand, like when people say they want to win, I think it's just overused. A lot of guys say that they don't really want to win and do whatever it takes to win. But I really believe that Giannis wants to win so badly. And I thought the Bucks's gaffes leading up to, his decision really just was such a bad look. It was almost embarrassing. And so I thought, like, maybe he's done. Maybe he's like, you know what? I gave it my shot. And, Kostas in LA, everyone was talking about that. So I thought, okay, like it could go either way. But then when he stayed, I was like, of course, right? We all had that reaction, like, duh. But it's something that I don't think we'll be able to appreciate for a couple years how rare this is. And I don't think also that this is now going to lead to other people wanting to go to small markets either. I think this is just Giannis is unique. And I don't think we will see other people doing this as well.
Yeah, I mean, and we have, like Reggie Miller is a good example, right, of the old school, because he has, I think it was like 92, maybe 92, 93, somewhere in there. He was going to be a free agent, and Magic was lobbying him to come to the Lakers and all that stuff. And he played at UCLA, and he ended up staying in Indiana, and he stayed there for 18 years. And I think, we've talked about this a few times on the podcast about whether Curry was potentially going to be the last guy ever who's start, middle, finish one team. Mm-hmm. But I think Giannis has a real chance now. I think this almost was the fork in the road moment. The team's good enough that they'll make the finals one of these years. I do think they shot themselves in the foot a little bit. The holiday trade saved a lot of it, but yeah, the summer they had, the summer of free agency last summer was just flat out bad. The DJ Augustine contract was abominable. I don't feel like they really got better. Same thing when they gave the Bledsoe the extension and didn't keep Brogdon and things like that. And I think their owners and their front office are very sensitive to this stuff. They haven't really splurged on the luxury tax. Even now, as we head toward the trade deadline, they're not over the part where it's like, all right, this could cost a lot of money. Like, what is his relationship with the front office? And like, does he put pressure on them? How does that all work?
I mean, I think like being vocal is something that has taken time for him to do, right? Like, Jason Kidd used to have to like force him to like open his mouth and say something. So when I hear now that in these sort of, private conversations and, we need this guy, we need that guy, he's more vocal. Like he
Mm,
actually gives a list and is like, I want this guy. And it's not like I wouldn't describe it as like aggressive or anything like that, but his voice is absolutely there because it's his team now and he's grown into honestly just a man. He was a child when he came into the league, really not a child, but a teenager, a baby faced kid. And now he's earned the right to speak up in these meetings. So I think he's been very vocal about it, very present. Because again, like I said, you don't want to squander this guy's youth.
yeah.
You just never know. And Milwaukee, it's like, the wound and the fear of squandering somebody's prime is so real. And one of the things that I found most fascinating when I was thinking about will he stay or will he leave was the decades old wound of Abdul Jabbar leaving. And it's like, finally, the superstar stays, finally, management is actually trying to win a championship, right? There was decades under Senator Cole where it was like, we don't care, we're just going to do whatever we need to do. We're going to be competitive. We're going to make that eighth seed. So if you look at that mentality to now, Drew, PJ Tucker, it's just a totally different feel. And Giannis is ever, a part of that.
Well, the Jabbar thing's especially tough because that really had nothing to do with the team being competitive. They made the 74
Right.
finals. I mean, they weren't exactly loaded, but the league was in a weird place. The ABA had all the young guys and stuff like that. He just didn't want to live in Milwaukee anymore, which is painful if you're from Milwaukee, right? And you have this guy's like, it's too small. Get me to New York or LA. LeBron at least massaged it a little bit where
Right.
he's like, I need a new journey. But Cleveland was too small for him. And then eventually he flipped it and he came back. But um, I don't know. I think if you're from there, that Jabbar thing is like a pretty big scar. So the fact that Giannis stayed, I think that can't be understated. That's a huge thing.
It can't be understated. It's a wound that is even for people that were not, Abdul Jabbar's generation. It's something that's just handed down from your parents because it's not a city that doesn't love its team. It's always loved its team, even when people doubted whether basketball could even work in Milwaukee, right? Like the Atlanta Hawks, originally being there and then leaving. It's always like the place where you start, but you never stay. That's just it's embedded, and it's always like hope, but don't get your hopes up. Don't be too hopeful because you're going to be disappointed. The star is going to leave. That 2000 to 01 run with George Karl and Big Dog and Sam Cassell and Ray Allen, like that, like still triggers Milwaukeeans when they think about Ray Allen leaving. So, Giannis staying or leaving had so much more emotions than whether this player likes Milwaukee or not. It had like decades old baggage. And I know Giannis was aware of that, his rookie year, they won 15 games. Like,
Right.
don't forget that. That was and that was the polar vortex year. And it was cold and it was miserable. And so, yeah, like I think the history is a part of that. I don't think you can talk about Giannis staying and what that means to the franchise moving forward without having that conversation about, Abdul Jabbar.
In your research for the book, because one of the kind of themes with him was he was homeless in Greece. Like, how much of that was true? How much of it was it apocryphal? Was he actually homeless? Like, what'd you find out?
He wasn't homeless, but they kept getting evicted often. And so they would have to convince the landlords, like, hey, we're going to get paid tomorrow. Come back tomorrow. Promise, we'll pay you. And, oftentimes they would get told, you have to leave. You have to get up. You have to go. And they would have to just be out in a matter of hours. It is very true that Giannis just wasn't eating. And I think lost in the narrative of he's so skinny that rookie year was like, yeah, because he was malnourished. Like
Mm,
that draft that, you were part of, it was such an emphasis on like Giannis, such a great kid, great story, overcomes obstacles, but like I don't think people truly knew how hard that was, how hard it is to compete when your first meal comes at 11 p.m., how hard it is when you are essentially the alpha of your brothers at age 13. Um, and I think like what's even more miraculous is that he didn't even really know much about the NBA at all. Like the players on the court would come up to him and say, "You're like Dr. J." And then he would just be like, "Who is Dr. J?"
Right.
And then he and his brothers would go like scrounge around for a euro to go to the internet cafe and Google Dr. J, you know? So for him, it's like, okay, first priority is eating. Second priority is parents' health and them getting money. And then third is selling. And then fourth was basketball. So if you look at like him making it this far, it's miraculous because the kid had so many deeper worries.
Do you think that's why he grew? It sounds weird to even think that, but if he was malnourished and then for the first time had like a normal schedule then thing, because it's so rare. I can only remember it happening a few times. Rodman was another one where sometimes these people grow at age 19, age 20, and they'll grow an extra 3 inches. But it's a pretty late stage for him to just add on 2.5 inches or 3 inches, whatever it was.
You know, that's fascinating, and there could be something to that. I talked with the former Bucks team chef,
You might have
and
to do more interviews. You might have to
I
talk to
know.
like seven
Oh my
nutrition
god.
experts. This guy ate at like 227.
Oh my god. I know. I know. But the former Bucks chef was really helpful as a part of this kind of dialogue because he was telling me like obviously Giannis has never heard of like a turmeric shot, right? But all of a sudden he's like getting all this like health and food and treatment that he's never had before. And it's like, it made a tremendous difference, right? I think
Yeah.
like everyone talks about like, oh, he just weightlifted like crazy. That's how he looks like a Greek god. But they've actually worked so much on his nutrition. Like the strength coach, when he first got to Milwaukee, had to tell him like, it's okay to eat 3 meals a day. Like it's okay because it just wasn't part of his upbringing, you know? And like he would take stuff home and stuff it in boxes, thinking like, well, I might not have food tomorrow, even though like, of course you're gonna have food tomorrow. Like the Bucks will provide food tomorrow, but how could he be sure? You know what I mean? So it's been a journey in like learning how to eat properly and like feeding yourself. And now like he has his whole routine down. My fave thing is he sends the chef a egg emoji or the chef emoji when he wants an egg white omelet. So I love that detail. Um, like casual, like, can you just fix me an omelet right now? But yeah, like you would never have had him do that years ago. Never.